What is up, guys? Zackin here. Welcome to the Bags to Riches podcast. I'm your host, and today we have Brian. And Brian's going to share exactly how he got his first deal with an inbound marketing lead, basically for free. And it netted him over $18,000. And that was two deals. And he got a third deal on the way. And really, what I want to do is break down with Brian how he did it, and most importantly, how you can do the same thing in your wholesaling real estate business. And Brian is doing this at a New York, a little tougher market. So I'm excited to break down exactly how he's doing it and how you can do the same thing. But first of all, welcome, Brian.
Thank you so much, Zach. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I really look up to you and your dad and all the content you guys push out. So, thanks for having me on.
Awesome, man. So you got your first deal. This is really exciting. Let's kind of bring it back. What is your upbringing to the point here to get your first deal? Like, what got you into wholesaling?
Absolutely. So I'm actually an electrical engineer by trade. So I kind of do wholesaling part-time, but I've always been interested in real estate, just working a 9 to 5 till I'm 65 just doesn't sit right with me. So, I was like, if I could retire early, then, that's kind of the strategy I'd want to take is to retire early. So I had always heard about wholesaling. It seemed like a good way to get into investing in terms of, low risk. You can get in with little capital. You weren't actually doing the renovations yourself. So that was appealing to me. And then I came across your channel, and I was kind of off to the races from there. I went through a lot of your free content, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give this a try and just give it a go.
Awesome. And so how long ago was that when you first learned about wholesaling till now?
It took me 2 years to get
Wow.
my first deal. And I do it part-time. I'm not as consistent as I should have been, but I didn't give up. And that's one of the things I mentioned in wholesaling houses for real was the persistence that paid off. If you stick at it and you keep going, eventually you'll get that first deal. And I've kind of been cheap with it. I haven't spent any money on marketing. I didn't have prop stream. I was hand dialing numbers, skip trace and everything myself, really doing everything the free route. So
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to prove to myself that it could be done before I invested too much money into marketing or, hiring VAs or whatnot. So that's kind of the route I went. But yeah, it took me over 2 years to find this deal.
Wow. And before we break down that first deal you got, like what's some of the pain, the trials and tribulations starting out in wholesaling in the first 2 years that you had to deal with?
So my biggest thing was getting over my fear of making cold calls. I remember, the first time I went to go make a cold call, I was literally like shaking. I was sweating. I was like, oh, I don't want to call these people. And it's really like working out or flexing a muscle. The more you do it, the easier it gets. So I guess, yeah, definitely for me, the hardest part was cold calling and staying consistent, working a full-time job and then coming home and making cold calls for 2 hours every night. That could get tedious, but I knew what the end goal was and what I wanted to get to. So I kind of stuck with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about this first deal. We
Yep.
see the nice checks. We saw 2 checks here. Like,
Yeah.
what's that story? How did that deal get to you?
Absolutely. So it didn't come from cold calling. It actually came from my other free marketing strategy, which is posting ads on Craigslist. So, I post ads on Craigslist every day. And this was actually an inbound lead. So this lead actually came to me. He was an older gentleman. His health was kind of poor. He couldn't keep up on the properties. He had tenants that weren't paying rent since, the worldwide issue that kind of happened. And I don't want to mention it, but
Yeah.
yeah. And so with that, he had a lot of non-paying tenants, and New York State isn't a very friendly landlord state.
No.
Uh, there's a lot of stipulations in New York. It's an attorney closing state, which makes it kind of a pain as well. But yeah, I mean that's kind of how these deals came to me. It was off a Chrysler ad, and this guy had three properties that were all next to each other on the same street, 11 units total, and he wanted to be done with them. So that's kind of how I came across my first deal. Was off Chrysler side actually.
Wow. So you post it every day. Like, what's the ad copy? Like, what are you posting? Where are you posting?
So I post in Craigslist ad in terms of there's a section for housing wanted. So I
Hmm.
post in the housing wanted section. Um, I don't know if a lot of other folks have this issue in their markets, but a lot of times your ads will get flagged by other wholesalers.
Wow.
So they'll flag your ad, they'll take it down. So you just gotta be persistent. It's like it takes me 2 seconds to post the ad. I literally copy and paste. But but yeah, so I do that faithfully every day, even to this day. I'll post in that section. In terms of, I got a template. I think it was from Jerry Norton. He had, this is the template you should
Hmm.
use when you're posting a Craigslist ad. But I have my own LLC, Copper City Realty Group, and I post my logo. I post the ad along with my number and my contact information. And yeah, I mean, that's how I landed this deal. Literally zero marketing dollars out of pocket for this deal.
Wow.
So,
And what do they say? Like, we buy houses cash, we buy ugly
yep.
homes. Like, what? You can get really creative with it, right? Like, I don't want everyone using the same one, but like, pretty much kind of like
Sure.
a bandit sign, right?
Pretty much, yeah. So for the title, I put Brian buys houses. And then I say, are you in a troublesome situation? Do any of these
Yeah.
situations apply to you? Pre-foreclosure, mold problems, non-paying tenants. And then I pretty much say, we buy houses cash as is, pay all the closing costs. There's no real estate commissions involved, and then pretty much leave your contact information. But it's pretty boilerplate, nothing special. But yeah, I mean, it got me this first deal, which was kind of a trifecta. It was kind of three deals in one. And like you said, I
Yeah.
closed on two of them, and I'm gonna close on the next one hopefully next week. But I mean, it's a total of 29K for my first wholesale deal. I don't think that's not too bad. That's not too bad.
Hey, that ain't bad at all. I mean, so do you just have a phone number and they called you? Do they message you, email you? Like, how did this first lead come? So you're just posting every day, every day, every day. Like,
Sure.
how did this come? Like, when was your first Craigslist ad till this deal call?
So literally, I've been posting Craigslist ads for probably over a year. So
Oh
I
wow.
got this. So this first deal came along in June. So we'll get to that, but it's taken over 5 months for this deal to close.
Wow.
But so I leave my contact information, my phone number. You can email me, or so you can respond back to the Craigslist post via email, or
Hmm.
you can call and text person if you leave a number. So this guy actually called me up. So and I just had a Google Voice number, So he just I left my Google Voice number. He called me up, and then yeah, we spoke on the phone. I built a little rapport with him. And I went out to the properties. Well, first I ran some numbers to see if I could meet him anywhere in the near the
What was his
ballpark of what he.
motivation?
So he has failing health. He has COPD. He worked in a factory for a long time, and he just couldn't keep up with the properties.
Hmm.
And he had tenants that weren't paying rent, and it just turned into a headache. Beside his ailing physical health, it was just the properties were just taking a toll on him, mentally. I mean, he was just your typical tired landlord. He just
Yeah.
had these properties he couldn't keep up on. And then, I think the pandemic was really the last straw with, having folks not paying rent,
Oh yeah.
and not being able to collect rent. And so after that, he was just like, I need to get rid of these properties. So
Wow.
That was
Okay.
his motivation. That was his motivation. Between the health and the non-paying tenants, he was he was ready to sell, and he was ready to give a deep discount. So
Oh man. So like, do you just go to the properties? Were you allowed in there, or is there not a tenant in there not paying? Like, let's talk about that first situation.
yeah, I mean, so once I ran the numbers, I determined I could give him what he wanted, and I probably could have got more for the deals, but I was like, you know what? Let's just try to get 10,000 a piece for each property, just so I could, prove to myself that I could do this. I wasn't going to try to wring out every last dollar I could. But
Yeah.
once I ran the numbers, I said, okay, I looked at the ARV for each property. I kind of estimated the repairs just based on the square footage of the property, without coming to see it first. But after I thought I could make a deal happen, I set up an appointment to go look at the properties. So some of the units I was able to get into, some of the units I wasn't able to get into. So I just took pictures, of the units I was able to get into, and we locked it up. We signed the purchase and sale agreement. It was just a simple, boilerplate purchase and sale agreement, and I actually marketed the deal on a Facebook group, a local upstate New York real estate investing group, and I had interested folks within a day or two. So I guess I kind of lucked out in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, so you found the first buyer through a Facebook group.
Yep, that's how I found the buyer, was through a Facebook group. So I had one person, he was interested. I showed him the properties. He was trying to lowball me a little bit, like, at first he said he can meet me at, what I wanted for it. Then he was like, oh, I think I can only pay this much. So I was like, you know what? I have a few other people that are interested. I'll get back to you. So I had, another buyer come in, and, they were willing to pay the full assignment fee. So then we kind of went from there. Um, but it's been a nightmare. I mean, I've had to deal with everything imaginable with this deal, which is kind of good for my first deal because I've kind of been through the gamut of problems that you can run into, from squatters, non-paying tenants, buyers backing out last minute. I mean, it's been quite the journey.
Well, let's break this deal down so people can know
Yeah,
what to do if they get in this situation. So first off, person's not paying. I'm assuming this first deal, tenant's still in there, not paying.
absolutely.
So how do you bring this to a buyer? Like, why would a buyer even want to buy this deal, right? Like, how
Yep.
did you sell that to them? And what was the solution to get this all done?
So actually, the seller handled the evictions.
Oh, wow.
So one of the stipulations of the wholesale deal was that the properties had to be not completely vacant, but all of the tenants that weren't paying rent had to be evicted.
Got it.
So that was kind of one of the stipulations for the buyer to take. If the buyer was going to take on those non-paying tenants, then I would have had to get the properties at a much steeper discount because
Yeah.
most buyers don't want to take that risk on.
Yeah.
So with this one, the seller agreed to go through the eviction process, get the non-paying tenants out so that we could close on a deal. And that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long to close on this deal. That's why it's taken 5 months, because the eviction process in New York it can be lengthy, depending
Yeah.
on the amount of time a tenant's been in there. So if a tenant's been in a property for a year or less, you have to give them a 30-day notice. If they've been in for 2 years or more, then they need a 60-day notice. And then once they have that 60-day notice, they get served with a court date. And when they go to court, they can request a 30-day extension. And most times the judge will grant that 30-day extension. I mean, they don't even have to have a reason. As long as they show up to court and say, hey, I need an extra 30 days, then that can drag it out even longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, New York's kind of crazy. But we were able to get some of the tenants out by giving them cash for keys. So that actually
Okay.
worked in two instances.
Well,
We said, hey,
explain what the numbers were on cash for keys, and explain what is cash for keys for somebody who doesn't know that.
absolutely. So cash for keys is when you offer to give a tenant that isn't paying rent cash in return for them vacating the premises.
Hmm.
So you want to hold off on giving them any money until they give you the keys in hand. And unfortunately, I learned this lesson the hard way for one of the tenants because I gave the cash to the landlord. We actually split it 50-50. So one of the tenants
All
agreed,
right.
hey, they were like, give me $1,000 and I'll leave. So I went with the seller. I was like, hey, I'll give you $500 if you put up $500 in your own money. That way we can get this guy out. Well, he decided to give him the money ahead of time because the tenant said, "Oh, well, I need the money to find a new place." I was like, "No, why did you do that?" And of course, we kind of got stiffed.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was like, "All right, that won't ever happen again." But we were successfully able to do it with two other tenants. We didn't give them the cash until they gave us the keys, told them the apartment had to be in broom swept condition. And that actually worked. So that kind of sped up the process for two of the properties, the two that I was able to close on already. And now one of the lawyers is on vacation, but when they get back, we'll be able to close on the other one. So,
All right. Beautiful. So that first deal, $9,000. The second one, $9,000. Which one had the squatter?
so the one that had the squatter was actually one of the properties that we already closed on. So it was one of so actually they're both so both those properties I closed on were for 10,000 a piece. But my EMD that I required from the buyers, that came in separate.
Got it.
So that was actually the assignment fee less the EMD that I required. So for these cases, it was just $1,000 EMD for each property. And I made it refundable as long as it was because of no fault of the buyers. Um, a lot of wholesalers they'll require a $3,000 non-refundable EMD, but I found that scares a lot of buyers away.
Yeah.
I don't know what your experience is. You have a lot more experience than I do.
It's different in New York, especially with the attorney state there. So it does get a little weird with it. But so with the squatter here, how did
Yeah,
you get them out? Was it cash for keys?
no. So with the so in New York, squatters even have rights.
Of
You
course they
can't,
do.
yeah, like a sheriff can't just come in and get the squatters out.
Yeah.
So in that case, since they're not in the lease, you only have to serve them with a 14-day notice to vacate.
Oh, wow.
So we serve them. So the seller served the squatters with a 14-day notice to vacate. But once they get that notice, they still have the opportunity to go to court too, even
Yeah.
though they're squatters. And then they can request an extension as well. I mean, it's a long story, but they were doing a lot of wild things in that apartment.
Oh, yeah.
And so the city ended up condemning the property because of the squatters that were upstairs,
Wow.
which actually helped us out because it got them out faster. And the city condemned it for silly reasons, like for one of the apartments missing a fire alarm, like the city basically just condemned it just to get the squatters out, which actually worked in our favor. So once the squatters were kicked out, then we were, able to close on that property. So we closed on two of the properties at the same time. And now we're just
Wow.
waiting on the third one. So
What was the process of getting it uncondemned to be able to wholesale?
So all the buyer had to do was bring it back up to codes. And
Oh,
for this case, it was as simple as, I mean, the violations were one of the violations was a missing door, and then another violation was a missing fire detector or smoke detector. So in that case, it was relatively easy to get it back up to codes, and the buyer was willing to stick it out in terms of that. I got lucky in terms of, a lot of buyers would have been scared away with a lot of the things that happened throughout the process, but this guy actually stuck with it. He did have a partner, and the partner is the one that backed out
yeah.
like a month before we are gonna close. But luckily, he was able to find another partner, and we took it to the finish line.
Wow. Beautiful. And then
Yeah.
so One was an apartment. The second one, what was the first one? A house?
So they're all well, so one of them is a 5 unit, which is classified as an apartment. It's like it's a
Got it.
commercial, it's zoned commercial. Anything over 4 units is zoned commercial in New York. I don't know how it is in Florida. Um, One of the properties was a triplex, and then another one was a duplex with a bungalow on the property, which was another unit that you could rent
Ooh,
out. So it was almost like a triplex. It's kind of weird, but it was 11 units between the three properties.
wow.
So I
All
got them
right.
under contract for 30 a piece, and then I signed them for 40 a piece, with the exception of the 5 unit. I assigned, well, my assignment fee for that one was 9K because, like I said, I gave the seller an additional $1,000 to help with some of the evictions. So
Got it. And then were the buyers were able to walk them through with the tenant still in there, or did they not let you guys in?
no, so some of the tenants were cooperative, other ones weren't as cooperative. So another thing that kind of delayed the process is the buyers weren't true cash buyers, which I didn't realize until we were already in the process. So they actually got hard money loans to take down the properties, which made it even more of a pain because they had to get appraisals on the properties. So they had to go through the property like 3 or 4 times, which was annoying.
Oh yeah.
I mean, usually it's, hey, this is the inspection. You look at it one time, close it, take it down or move on. With this one, there was like 3, 4 different inspections. So I had to keep going back to the seller, say, hey, they have to walk through the property again. They have to do an appraisal. So that was challenging. But we made it happen. So some of the units we weren't able to get into until some of the non-paying tenants had vacated the premises. But other tenants, they were cool with, having us walk through. They understood that the homes were getting sold, and so
Wow. Okay. So you got that whole process. How did you find the right attorney for wholesaling for you in New York?
I had to literally go through Google, and I would just call lawyers and say, "Hey, are you familiar with assignment of contract?" And most of them are like, "What?" And as soon as they say that, I'm like, "Okay, have a nice day." Obviously, they don't know what a wholesale deal is. Or I had some attorneys just flat out telling me, "Oh, you can't wholesale in New York." Okay, you have a good day, sir. But I'm actually part of a real estate investing club, and one of the guys in that club recommended a lawyer to me that was wholesale friendly. So I
Oh,
actually
beautiful.
connected with him, and yeah, we made the deal happen. But with this deal, there was 4 attorneys. The seller had an attorney. I had an attorney. The buyer had an attorney. And then because they were doing a hard money loan, there was a bank's attorney involved. So there's 4 different attorneys involved. I'm like, if you can wholesale in New York, you can wholesale anywhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were like, why don't you go to a virtual market where it's easier, where it's a title closing, state. I really wanted to do a deal in my backyard.
Yeah.
I really wanted to do a deal in my backyard. So, now that I've done a deal in my backyard, I might expand into other markets. But yeah, New York's New York's tough. If you can do a wholesale deal in New York, you can do a wholesale deal anywhere.
Oh yeah. And so you got the first check, the second check, and we're
Yep.
working on the third. I mean, how did it feel after 2 years to finally get that check, get that money, and really show the entire process that it works to you?
I mean, it felt amazing. There was many times throughout this 2 years where I was like, what am I doing? I have a decent job. Why am I breaking my neck doing this? But it got to a point where I was like, what? I've put in so much time. I've put in so much effort into this already. I have to see it through. I have to
Yeah.
at least get one deal. And that's kind of what kept me going. A lot of people would have quit and said, oh, this isn't for me. But I kind of kept at it. And I'm so glad I did because it feels so good to finally get that check in hand and prove to myself that it's possible. I mean, it's different when you see people on YouTube, with their checks in their hand, but when you actually do it yourself, that really solidifies it and makes it real. So
Wow. I mean, that's awesome. Brian, that's the
thank
point
you.
That's what we want to share. It's just you went through it. You did the stuff that nobody else was willing to do, and it
Yeah.
led you to your success here. So that Craigslist stuff does work. I know a lot of people that do that with like
Nice.
Facebook groups, like for the city or just a group for the people, citizens, and people charge like $3 or $4 to do that. And it's ridiculous because it's like it's so simple, right? And everyone kind of knows it. You don't need to pay money for it, and it worked for you. So Brian, this was amazing. I mean, do you have any parting
Thank
thoughts
you.
for the audience listening? Like, hey, you know what? What's something you think you can leave to them that can really help them on their journey, especially if they're going through something very similar to you?
Absolutely. So you can absolutely do this, and you can absolutely do it part-time. The only thing stopping you is your own limitations that you impose on yourself. You can do this with no money. I spent zero money out of pocket for marketing. Zach has great resources on freewholesaling.com on how you can skip trace your own numbers, how you can drive for dollars. I mean, walk for dollars, run for dollars, go biking for dollars. This is literally a business you can get into with $0 out of pocket and actually change your life. And like I said, the only thing stopping you is you. It's absolutely possible. It's all about your commitment and how bad you want it. And if you really want it bad enough, you'll get that first deal. And, persistence and consistency is key. The one thing I wish I would have kept doing was marketing while I had this deal, because I
True.
stopped marketing. I was like, you know
Ah,
what? I'm going to focus on taking this to the finish line. And so now I'm kind of back at square one because I didn't continue to market as this deal went through. So, I mean, in the future, even as I have deals in the pipeline, what I'm going to do is continue to market for new deals. So, but yeah, I mean, it's absolutely doable. It's absolutely doable.
oh yeah, Brian, never quit marketing, never quit the consistency,
Yeah.
and you got the deal. So we'll celebrate. We'll go back on the marketing, get it going. But Brian, thank you
Yeah.
so much for hopping on. Whenever somebody complains about me about New York, I'm just going to send them this video. So it worked
No,
out
sounds
very
good.
well.
Yeah.
Brian,
And thanks
thank
again
you
for
so
having
much.
me, Zach.
Of
Yep.
course,
Have a
man.
great one.
I love the consistency. So appreciate it, guys. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit Brian up if you got any deals up in his neck of the woods. What areas are you specifically wholesaling in? And obviously, you have attorneys, buyers, things like that. If someone wants to do a deal with you, how could they reach out?
Absolutely. So I'm in Rome, New York, Utica, New York, and Syracuse, New York, mainly. I can be reached at Copper City Realty at gmail.com. I also have a Facebook page, Copper City Realty Group. So that's my LLC. And I'll also put my business phone out there for anyone that wants to hit me up. That's 315-533-2201. And I'd love to collaborate. So
All right. Love it. Brian, thank you so much for hopping on. Can't wait to see
thanks,
your
man.
success in the future and see the next deal you got.
I appreciate it.